Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Well, Tony, we are one day away from almost definitely the biggest game of the Ohio State football season so far. So I am pretty darn excited. A little leery about the weather and getting to stand out in the rain for the second straight week. But, all things considered, it is, if I'm going to stand in the rain for anything this weekend, a pretty darn big football game between two legitimate national championship contenders seems like a pretty good reason. But beats raking leaves.
It does, especially in the rain. Now, I'm looking at the weather forecast, and right now, showers developing later in the day, which is fine. But I do get concerned about the walk from the tunnel garage all the way around Ohio Stadium to the press entrance, and then the walk back all the way to Tuttle Garage across the street there at Tuttle Park. And so, yeah, I don't want to. The rain is going to be an issue for me as well. So, thank you for thinking of me, Tom, with your concern about the rain. But I will soldier on. This won't keep me down. I will wait in a dry area if need be until the rain subsides. So, thank you.
Your courage knows no bounds. None whatsoever.
Not a single bound.
Not a single bound. Let's please start talking about the game. There's a lot to talk about here, and it's maybe even more exciting, potentially, than the walk from the parking garage directly across the street to the stadium.
Potentially. Although I wonder who will have more first downs, me or these two offenses against these two defenses. Probably the offenses against these defenses. I think we don't know yet in terms of who will be available to play. Ryan Day being exactly as you would expect before a big game, not saying anything about anything. You ask him about an ankle, and right now he'll be like, "What's an ankle? Is this a new thing? Is this what the kids are talking about? Is this some slang?" No, we're talking about Emeka Egbuka. How is his ankle? I don't even Emeka who stuff like that. He's not acknowledging anything. When we did a show Wednesday night and we're trying to see who's coming in and who's walking and who's looking fine, like we said then, I saw Travion Henderson and Mind Williams both looked like they had practiced. I didn't see Chip. I didn't see Emeka. I didn't see Denzel Burke, but I think others have. But at this point, I only address this because we don't really have any answers as to who's going to play and probably won't until we get the availability report.
Right. And the fact that you didn't see these guys, it's not like this is kindergarten and they walk in with a line leader and, they're not standing in depth chart order as they walk in. It's, you get defensive linemen walking in with wide receivers and walk-ons walking in with, Marvin Harrison or whatever. There is no rhyme or reason necessarily to who comes in where and when. And as this is all happening, we're also trying to set up for interviews. So I did not get a chance to do a real intentional look around at who was going past. So the fact that I have not chipped in on this conversation and said, "Oh yes, I saw fill in the blank name here," is because I was doing other stuff related to my job at that time. So yeah, I think this is going to be just we'll see on Saturday morning, 10 a.m. The availability report comes out. We will have a full report at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle as soon as that comes out. But it feels like that, that could be a fairly consequential story Saturday morning if, is Denzel Burke back? Is Emeka Egbuka back? Those are legitimate questions right now, and it feels like that could be a good chunk of the narrative around this game by 10 a.m. on Saturday.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll touch on it more in this show as well. First, before we get started with I want to talk about the Penn State offense first, but just also want to remind people to come find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. If you're not yet become a member, now is a great time to join. Got the season going on. We've got October, then November, then bowl travel and the bowl games and a ton of coverage there. Signing day coming up, Tom, in like 2 months, which is crazy. But all of that stuff is going on right now, and there's constant updates and information going on at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Please become a member. It's a great way to support what we do. Everybody talks about the Penn State defense and all of the high rankings. I don't know how many people understand how highly ranked Penn State is offensively in a bunch of different categories. They're number one in rushing in the Big Ten. They are number one in protection in terms of fewest sacks allowed in the Big Ten. They're number 5 nationally. They've given up like 4 sacks on the season. They are number 1 in turnover margin, number 2 in total offense in the Big Ten, like number 1 in time of possession. All of these things where if you look at just all of the rankings, they're like 1, 2, 1, 2 in defense and offense and a bunch of different stuff. So when you look at this Penn State offense, Drew Aller, sophomore quarterback, is the guy that is supposed to take this offense to the next level. And while the rankings on certain things are good, he hasn't necessarily taken the offense to the next level. And we've discussed the lack of explosive plays, the checkdowns. You've got some great information on air yards. But one of the things Jim Knowles talked about was he keeps them on schedule. And so you have to get him off schedule. You've got to ruin his timing. And you've got an offense in Penn State that will just dink and dunk and move the chains. You've got a defense in Ohio State that is okay with bending but not breaking, but don't tell Jim Knowles that, but has been getting more aggressive. Do you have to get aggressive in this rather than just be bend but don't break? Because that's Penn State's offense. So don't you have to do something differently than what their offense is accustomed to?
I think you have to try to. I think they're going to come out and try to be, kind of stay a little bit more in their base and what they're trying to do, and not bring in 7 guys or something like that. I think they're going to try that, and then if that doesn't work, then you get a little more aggressive. Jim Knowles wants to keep things in front of them, get guys off schedule, make Penn State complete 2 passes in 3 plays to get across, to pick up a first down and keep moving. I think you kind of have to give a first-time starter in a big hostile environment. You got to give him a little bit of a chance to fail, because he hasn't had to. I mean, no disrespect to the terrible, terrible football teams that Penn State has played so far this season, but none of them are as good as Ohio State, even close to it. And they haven't really had to play in a hostile road atmosphere yet either. So I think you have to give Drew Aller a chance to fail against more of a base look. And then you see, and some of this will depend on whether Denzel Burke is playing or not. But, if Penn State is running the ball for 5.5 yards a carry and they're staying on schedule on the ground, well, then you're going to have to get a little more aggressive. If they are, I don't think Ohio State's going to be playing like off man coverage and, giving Penn State, 8 yards of cushion off the line of scrimmage or anything like that. I think you can get aggressive in terms of pressing a little bit and make Penn State try to beat you deep, but don't go cover 0. Like there is a middle ground between playing prevent defense and playing what Ohio State was playing in the 4th quarter against Michigan last year, and in long stretches against Michigan last year, where there's not a safety in center field. So if they do, if the team that doesn't throw the ball downfield much suddenly starts doing it, it's boom, long touchdown after long touchdown. I think they're gonna play smart and safe and see where that goes, and then you can spin the dial of aggressiveness a little bit from there.
I think not that Jim Knowles would ever tell us this, but when they watch the Penn State offense, I don't know how threatened they feel by it. They know that Drew Aller can make all of the throws. They know that the running backs can make all of the runs. But this is a quarterback who has time to throw it and is still checking down, is still taking the easier throws, the not downfield at all throws. And so then it becomes a situation where, like you said, do you need to speed him up, or is the defense confident enough that we can get there with 4 or 5 or whatever and just create enough of an issue that he is inaccurate at times. And from watching him in some of the games, now I didn't bother watching him against Delaware, didn't bother watching them against Massachusetts, but there's some easy throws that are wide or high. And so do you just count on those on 3rd downs? And I don't know how much you want to. I don't think a defensive coordinator feels great about counting on a mistake by an opposing player. So they're obviously going to try to create some havoc through the front 4 and whatever else they need to do. I tend to think that Sonny Styles is going to have an impact in this game, because Penn State will play a bunch of 12 personnel, 2 tight ends. And we know that's kind of what Sonny's job is. That's one of you go back to the Georgia game last year. They brought him in because they wanted him to play against two tight ends and then handle some coverage issues there, and also handle some run issues. And I think you can do both with him, but also you can maybe make him that fifth pass rusher, blitzing off the edge to create some timing issues. So I think there's just the balance of we're not threatened, but also we can maybe get away with being aggressive because we're not threatened. So I'm fascinated to see how they do this, because it's not an offense that is going to generally explode. But if you attack, you might lead to some explosion.
Right. You go from you're not allowing any big plays, but you're maybe not making too many big plays, to maybe you're making some big plays, but also you're maybe allowing some big plays. And in a game that I'm expecting, and I think Ohio State is expecting to be relatively low scoring, I think Ohio State would be somewhat surprised if they hit, I don't know what is the surprised number for Ohio State. The Ohio State coaching staff right now, in their heart of hearts, give them some sodium pentothal. Are they saying 31 points, 35 points, 38 points? Where is it like, oh, that was a surprisingly good performance
for the Ohio State offense?
Yeah, for the Ohio State team on the whole.
Yeah, I'd say anything over 31, I think, is like, wow. 31 feels like you're dragging and fighting for that last touchdown to make it 31. I think anything over 31 would be like, wow, okay, that's quality.
Yeah. So if you're trying to keep the score low, if you're anticipating the score is going to be low, then it feels like you don't want to give up a cheapie. You don't want to give up the, hey, the defensive back fell down and there was no one else back there, so you have a throw to a wide open receiver that is just 7 quick points. I think you probably are. Jim Knowles is not going to just sit back. I don't want to say that this is going to be Jim Knowles is going to just be very passive. By his nature, he is aggressive. He has said repeatedly, by his nature, he is aggressive. He wants to do more. He's trying to, this is, there are two wolves inside of you, and one of you wants to zero blitz a lot. And, he has mostly been the other wolf this year, but he wants to be more aggressive. I think until Penn State gives him a reason to be, I think he's going to be a little more conservative.
When you look at the run after catch and the explosive nature of the Penn State receivers, it's really not there. Keandre Lambert-Smith is their leading receiver, 402 yards receiving on 31 catches, 13 yards a catch, but like his first or second catch of the season went for 70 yards. Since then, he's basically averaging 10 yards a catch. You look at number 2 receiver Harrison Wallace, 13 catches, 142 yards, averaging 11 yards a catch. So Dante Cephas the transfer has not really done much. So to even seven catches for 103 yards on the season, there's not much there. The tight ends, Theo Johnson, who Ohio State recruited back in the day, I believe is Canadian, if I recall. He has 2 touchdown catches, but the other guy, Tyler Warren, their number 2 tight end, or perhaps he's their number 1, 5 touchdown catches on the season, caught 2 in one of the games I was watching. So when your best weapons are arguably your tight ends, that's always a red flag. Unless you are the 2017 Hawkeyes, in which it is a green flag, which means go to the end zone repeatedly. But I think with the passing game, the receivers, the options, I think limit Drew Aller, but I'm not convinced he doesn't also limit himself.
Well, I think he's been conservative. We're talking all sorts of, about how aggressive and conservative the Ohio State defense is going to be. Drew Aller has been conservative, and that's James Franklin said earlier in the week, like, he's fine with it. Like, 2 thumbs up, check down as much as you want, hang on to the ball, take care of the ball, live to fight another day. That has sort of been the mentality. And I don't know if that mentality continues to work when you're facing a substantially better defense than they've faced at any point this year. I think that is a little bit to be determined, because Penn State has not hit big plays really on the ground much. I think they had 4 plays of 30 yards or more on the ground, and 1 through the air, 2 through the air. They've just not hit big plays. And I mean, you mentioned earlier the stat about air yards, and this was a graph that was in an article from Tom Fornelli from CBS Sports about air yards per attempt, and that's just basically number of yards past the line of scrimmage that you're throwing. So if you're throwing the ball to it's 3rd and 10, and you're throwing the ball to a guy at the sticks, 10 air yards. Penn State has been between 6 and 7 air yards per pass. Just to put that in perspective, the next lowest in the Big Ten are Wisconsin and Illinois, neither of which are exactly, downfield bombers. They're at 8 yards per attempt. Iowa is at like 8.5 air yards per attempt. And in terms of average air yards to the sticks, Penn State throwing it more than 2 yards short of the sticks on average. So they're not throwing it, even if it's 3rd and 2 or, 3rd and 8, you're not necessarily even throwing it there. It has just been a lot of checkdowns, and that relies on, if you're throwing short of the sticks, you're relying on your players to make some guys miss at some point, because you're inviting the defense to creep up. You're inviting the defense to tackle you because you've got more guys there, close to the line of scrimmage if you're not going to take shots over the top. So you are relying on wide receivers, tight ends, running backs to make guys miss. And Ohio State has been a relatively sure tackling team. I mean, you go back to the Michigan game last year. You've seen, Cam Brown misses one tackle, and boom, it's a long touchdown on what could have been a 6-yard gain. So you have sort of seen this, but I just, you're relying on guys who have not broken a lot of tackles and turned, a 6-yard pass into a 25-yard gain a lot this season. And you're relying on an Ohio State team that has been relatively sure tackling, and it's done it really, even when they've missed tackles, they've rallied to the ball very well, where one missed tackle doesn't generally lead to a 6-yard play turning into a 30. It can be a 6-yard play turns into an 8-yard play, a 10-yard play, something like that. So all of this, I think, is a little bit of a concern to me from the Penn State perspective.
If you're going to throw short of the sticks, you want to have guys that will make people miss, who are, or that you're, like, I'm thinking these mesh routes and these inside routes and crossing routes where you throw it in a leading manner so that the receiver can run as they're catching it and they don't have to turn and slow their momentum. So I don't know how much of that's not happening, or if it's just a bunch of curl routes and guys are just sitting in a zone and you catch it and you get tackled. I would not expect that there's much yard after catch for these guys, and I don't have any rankings for that, but that's just my suspicion. So let's go to the run game then for Penn State, because they are leading the Big Ten in rushing at like just over 200 yards per game, but it's pretty suspicious. It's only 4.6 yards per carry, which is not a great number. 315 of their yards came against Delaware. 246 of their yards came against UMass. So, and they've rushed for 1,221 yards this year. 559 of that, nearly half of it in those 2 games. The other 4 games against Power 5 teams, they're rushing for, 160 some yards, something like that. 100, yes, in that realm. But the sheer number of carries, they had 57 rushes against Iowa. It's like they ran for 215 yards against Iowa. Wow, that's impressive. Nobody runs against Iowa. Well, they ran it 57 times, 3.8 yards per carry. They have yet to be at above 4.17 yards per carry against any Power 5 opponent. And that is pretty alarming. That's like Ohio State 2018 concerns that we talked about routinely. Like, this team isn't running the ball against anybody. But you look at the number of carries they have, and they just stick with it. They just continue to pound, and I swear it's 3 or 4 yards in a cloud of dust, because you look at their top 2 rushers, we know they're very good, and Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, but neither one of them are averaging even 5 yards a carry. Nick Singleton, 4.1, Katron Allen, 4.8. This is an offensive line that is apparently doing well and protecting everybody, but it does not seem like the running game is meshing right now with the quarterback. And I do have some 2018 Ohio State vibes, minus the electric passing attack. But it just seems like things just aren't clicking yet. But they're clicking enough to keep the ball against not great defenses. So we'll see what happens this week. But a lot to be concerned with on the running game aspect as well.
Well, I think let's start with how are Ohio State fans feeling about their running attack right now? Are they feeling good? Are they feeling confident? I mean, it feels like the answer is probably no and no. I mean, maybe hopeful, maybe. Ohio State against the Power 5 is averaging 3.47 yards per carry, which is not good. That is objectively not good. 3.47 yards per carry on 103 rushes, 5 touchdowns. Penn State 171 rushes, so they've stuck with the run a lot more against Power 5 opponents. 7 touchdowns instead of 5, 3.85 yards per attempt against the Power 5. And, that's 53rd in the country as opposed to 76th. So, I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball and consistently keep the chains moving with the running game. I think you're going to hit some, but if you're running for 3.85 yards, there's going to be some 8-yarders in there, but there's going to be some 1-yarders in there too. And that's where you sort of get behind the chains. That to me, I think is a concern for Penn State because Ohio State has Marvin Harrison. Penn State doesn't. Ohio State has a quarterback who is a first-year starter, but has another year in the system as compared to Drew Aller. Ohio State has a quarterback who is playing at home as compared to Drew Aller, who's going to be playing in front of the most hostile crowd he's faced so far. I don't expect Ohio State to run wild against Penn State. I don't expect Penn State to run wild against Ohio State. And I don't know if I'm even expecting either of these teams to be able to run consistently against the other team. I mean, how often is Penn State going to be on schedule if they have to do it on the ground? Because if you're averaging 3.85 yards per rush, that puts you in 2nd and 6. That is not, that is not, and it's really 2nd and 6 and some change. You're off schedule already there on average. So that I think is a little bit of a concern because that puts more pressure on the Penn State passing game, which has not been necessarily able to really carry the load for them. And this is, let's also say Penn State has played a better rush defense in Iowa than Ohio State has at any point in Power 5. Iowa's defense is better than, Notre Dame's. Iowa's defense is one of the best in the nation, but they've also played some not so great Power 5 defenses as well, just like Ohio State has. So I think those are fairly apples to apples numbers. And that's an area where if with Ohio State having a significant advantage in the passing attack, I think Penn State would have to have a more substantial advantage in the running attack to sort of balance that out.
If, you're talking about the 3 or 4 yards per carry, then that leads to like a 3rd and 2. And as we know, they throw 2 yards short of the sticks. So then you just have to tackle them at the line of scrimmage. Where I do think this could turn for Penn State is getting after Kyle McCord. So let's move to the Ohio State side of the ball. And when you look at the Penn State defense, they are, this might surprise you, Tom, last nationally in red zone defense. So now they have everybody, every single time an offense has gotten into the Penn State red zone, they have scored all 7 times this year. So that's 5 touchdowns. Doesn't happen often, but when you do, it's basically guaranteed points. So if Ohio State, the key to this game, Tom, get to the red zone, profit.
I really wish I'd heard that stat before our bold prediction show yesterday, because, oh boy, boldly predicting Ohio State to get to the red zone at least 2 times. Who says 2-pointer, 3-pointer? I don't know. Who's to say? Yeah, that's one of those situations where your denominator is so small, it doesn't matter. And a lot of those are probably coming in garbage time anyway. So yeah, I think Ohio State's going to be able to hit some big plays, and, you can avoid the red zone by throwing over it and into the end zone. That is a thing you can do as well. So yeah, that's something that I think I think Ohio State's going to be able to throw the ball. If you're Penn State, how are you defending Kyle McCord? Talk me out of my game plan. If I'm Manny Diaz, let's see Kyle McCord handle some pressure. I think he's done okay handling pressure. I think the line has done okay picking up blitzes. But I think if you're Manny Diaz, you're showing all sorts of exotic, zone blitzes, bringing pressure from all sorts of different angles. Make that Ohio State offensive line, which has been okay, but not the strength of the team by any means. Make them deal with picking up pressure. Make Kyle McCord deal with having guys in his face all game and force him to get the ball out. And, and at that point, you take your chances. I think Penn State's defense, if I'm coaching the two defenses, I'm being much more aggressive with Penn State's defense than I am with Ohio State's, just because I think there's some concern about how Penn State matches up against the Ohio State passing game if Kyle McCord has time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think attacking the Ohio State offensive line, I think, is a good idea. And by proxy, attacking the quarterback and getting things moving and creating some timing issues. And we have seen, and I've said it before, I feel like I'm almost harping on it, defenses are dropping passes that Kyle McCord is throwing to them a few times this year. Penn State can come away with those. They'll be well ahead of schedule. I also think that Penn State's defensive ends will get after the quarterback. Ohio State's tackles are going to have to play their best game, both of them, and the running back that stays in is going to have to play his best game in pass protection against a blitz or chipping or whatever. Same with the tight ends. They're going to have to pick up some blitzes, and Manny Diaz is going to dial some things up from a bunch of different angles. And Kyle McCord has handled blitzes well this season and has done well, and his receivers have as well. Now, if Emeka Egbuka can't go, you're initially going to be relying on Xavier Johnson, but perhaps at some point you're going to be relying on a freshman like Carnell Tate. And is that same connection there in terms of recognizing the blitz? And if Carnell Tate is the hot read and he doesn't recognize it, does that lead to, boy, that's a terrible pass that just got intercepted? And it's like, well, the receiver wasn't where he was supposed to be. And all of these are things that Kyle McCord is thinking through his head in terms of, can I trust this guy? And then once things aren't going well, if they aren't going well, then it becomes, can I trust my right tackle? Can I trust my left tackle? Can I trust Carson Hinsman? And just creates questions. You're hearing things, you're seeing things. And so the better they pick up those blitzes and hold the fort for him, obviously, will be the better. But I'm with you. The receivers at Ohio State, I think they have an advantage. I think Cade Stover, as Ryan Day will always talk about how his ability to catch and block puts defenses in conflict. Listening to James Franklin talk about Cade Stover, there's a Cade Stover fan in State College, at least until Saturday. I'm not sure how things go, if he's going to be that much of a fan after the fact. But there are weapons that he can go to, even if Emeka Egbuka isn't out there. When you look at this statistically, and again, Penn State has played nobody offensively. You can just rank in terms of yards per play nationally, 79, 85, 133, 122, 89. These are the offenses that they've played. But they're number one in yards per play allowed, 3.42. Ohio State is number 2, I believe. They're number 1 in sacks per game, 4.5. Number 1 in pass efficiency defense. Number 1 in pass completion defense, 49.1%, completing less than half of their passes. Number 1 in yards per game passes. Number 1 in yards per attempt, 4.6 yards per attempt for the Penn State defense. Tom, do you know how many touchdown passes they've allowed this year?
I'm going to guess the answer is 3.
It is 1, Tom. The answer is 1. Everybody else nationally has allowed at least 3. So they are significantly fewer than everybody else. So I guess, Tom, my question to you then is, how does Ohio State score even? Come on.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm expecting Ohio State to score a lot. There is the issue of Penn State not really playing a lot of very prolific offenses over the first half of the season. However, I've cited these stats before. This is from College Football Nerds. It's in terms of how are you doing relative to a team's average performance. So are you holding opposing teams that are good below their average performance? Are you holding teams that are bad below their average performance? Because if you're a good defense, you should be doing that. Against the pass, Penn State 11th in the country, holding opponents 25% below their average rush or pass per yards per attempt, passing the ball. So 25% below that. So if you're averaging 8 yards per attempt, Penn State's going to hold you to 6 yards per attempt on average. On the ground, even better. They're holding opponents 36% below their average rushing yards per attempt. That's 10th in the country. So I mean, this is a Penn State defense that, even though they're playing lousy opposition, they're holding the lousy opposition and making the lousy opposition's stats even worse on the whole, on the season, because they're holding them, 25, 36% below their averages. When your averages are low, that's really impressive to hold teams that low. For Ohio State, if you hold Ohio State 25% below their, or 36% below their, average rush, you're talking about like 3 yards per rush. That is not going to work for Ohio State. So, yeah, this is going to be, I think there's going to be, I mean, it's really trite to say, but it feels like this is a game that comes down to the one big mistake. The quarterback who turns it, throws the pick that either gets run back for a pick six or, that gives the team a short field. I mean, Penn State has, was it you on our board? Someone talked about the number of drives that Penn State has scored on touchdowns on that were like 50 yards or less, where they got the ball at midfield or on the plus side of the 50 and scored touchdowns. And it was like half of their touchdown drives or more. So you got to if Penn State has to drive 80 yards, that's not necessarily going to be a winning formula. If you give Penn State a bunch of short fields, you only got to score a couple touchdowns to potentially win this game. Because I don't think this game's getting to 38, 41 points. This is a game where one defensive touchdown or one short field could be the difference.
Yeah, I'm with you. It feels like a mistake or a big play. And if you get both of those, your chances go way up, but it's going to be hard fought. We have not have you sent in your prediction yet, Tom?
No, I have not.
How are you leaning? I don't know. Do you want to give your prediction at this point or do you want to force people to wait?
No, we can give our predictions. I mean, I haven't come up with a specific number, but I can do that right now. It feels like this game ends up with the winning team in the mid-20s, maybe. And I think it's probably pretty close, pretty late. So let's say Ohio State 24, Penn State 20, something like that. I mean, and the problem with this is I'm picking Ohio State to win. So everyone's going, Ohio State homer. I mean, if you're picking a 4-point game, that is the difference between, the Penn State, the Ohio State Notre Dame game, the difference between the Notre Dame linebacker catching the interception on the last drive and not catching the interception on the last drive. That's what a 3-4 point game is just one play. This is very much an anyone can win kind of game. In terms of confidence, like confidence intervals, I would say Ohio State, nothing between an Ohio State 14-point win and a Penn State 10-point win would like really shock me. But I think, Ohio State winning by a field goal or so is probably about right.
Vegas thinks so. 4.5 points, I believe, is the line. Tom, I did send in a prediction to Ben Jones at statecollege.com, Penn State beat writer, a couple days ago. My score at that point was also 24-20. So congratulations to both of us for getting the correct score if we were trying to guess each other's score. So good job.
Yeah, we have been very close on these. We never plan these out, and it feels like we're always like a field goal off one direction or another, or something like that, pretty much every week somehow. So yeah, it feels inevitable that we were going to end up somewhere in that range. So yeah, and if it's 24-20 Penn State, I would not be remotely surprised. It could just as easily be that as the other way around. It is literally just, the difference between 24-20 is one team scores a touchdown on, both teams score 2 touchdowns and a field goal, and then one team scores 1 extra touchdown and the other team kicks 1 extra field goal, and that's it. It's, hey, this guy, one guy dropped a 3rd and 7 pass. One guy got tripped up on, by his shoelaces and, stumbled and was just short enough of the sticks that the coach decided to kick a field goal. That's the difference we're talking about. You're talking real fine margins here, but I do think this is going to be, Ohio State, Penn State have played some real classics over the years, and I think this is going to be another one to add to that list.
Yeah, Ryan Day calls them 4-point plays, the play that gets thrown into the end zone and just gets tipped away, or then that drive ends up in a field goal, so you get 3 instead of 7. Feels like there's going to be one of those in there somewhere that is key. So that will do it for us today. I want to thank you all for joining us as always. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit the like and the subscribe button, hit the bell to be notified whenever we drop videos, go live. Plenty of live stuff going on this week, post-game show afterwards, immediately on this channel, youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle, live show from the stadium, all of the post-game interviews, then the post-game Buckeye Weekly Podcast as well. Check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com if you have not yet done so. Just go ahead and become a member there. That is a great way to support what we do. Also, youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Yeah, I already told you all of that. Tom, Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning podcast, please give that a listen. It's I almost said it's too much Tom. It's just the right amount of Tom. Tom, we don't have any more time, so we're going to go. No, Tom, you're fine. I want to thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you guys later.